All right, guys, we have an update on the DC shooting incident involving the two National Guardsmen. Unfortunately, one of them has died. Sarah Beckram, she sustained critical wounds from the shooting and unfortunately has passed away. The other, Andrew Wolf, remains in critical condition as the story proceeds. And we have an update on the suspect who apparently has ties to the CIA. So here in NPR, the National Guard shooting suspect served in CIA counterterrorism unit, Group SES, and the group that they're referring to here is Afghan Evac, which is a nonprofit run by U.S. veterans and others who served in Afghanistan. So pretty reputable source there. Ramanallah Lakanwal, the Afghan man who allegedly shot two National Guard members in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, previously served in one of Afghanistan's elite counterterrorism units, according to Afghan Evac, a nonprofit run by U.S. veterans and others who served in Afghanistan. Lakanwal's unit, NDS-03, operated at the direction of the CIA and fought the Taliban on behalf of the U.S. government, the group said. CIA Director John Ratcliffe said in a statement earlier Thursday that the shooter involved in the attack, who came to the U.S. from Afghanistan in 2021, was admitted into the U.S., quote, due to his prior work with the U.S. government, including CIA. Now, I'll just note that CIA Director John Ratcliffe is the current sitting Trump's CIA director, admitting that this man had involvement with the CIA. He arrived in the U.S. under humanitarian parole, the temporary authority used to evacuate tens of thousands of Afghans on special immigrant visas, and those Afghans who worked with the U.S. and were at risk from the Taliban. He applied for asylum in the Biden years and was granted asylum in April 2025 under the Trump administration. So as the story's been breaking and we've been uncovering and finding out more about the suspect in the news, the right and Fox News and everyone have been kind of frothing at the mouths and hoping and just praying that it was a left person who committed these atrocities and shot these National Guardsmen. And as we can see, it's a foreign national, someone who was admitted under Trump. So once again, the ball lands in their court. And, not to say that the Trump administration is necessary to blame for this, but they do bear some responsibility in their vetting process, as he was granted asylum just 7 months ago. So, Mike, what do you think of these turning events over here?
Well, it's definitely a tragedy, that's for sure. This is something that I never condone any kind of violence at all, and even in cases like this, where it's unclear what the motive is. Who knows why he did it? But even if like the common assumption is that it's going to be some form of resistance to what Trump is doing with the National Guard in D.C. But even if that's the case, I always advise people against even thinking this way, because as we've seen, it's you get the opposite of your result. So you think, okay, we're going to fight back, we're going to push back, but what's happening is Trump is doubling down. He's sending 500 more troops there. And what's interesting about that too is we had a judge recently come out and decree that him deploying the National Guard to DC has become illegal, because under the Constitution, DC can be federalized by the government. That is constitutional. He could do that, but it's explicitly, if I remember correctly, it explicitly mentions it should only be for 30 days. And they've been there much longer. So the judge has come out saying you have to get rid of the National Guard. You've overextended, and now he's bringing even more. So this is definitely kind of a shocking thing. It was definitely not something I was expecting to see or hear about on Thanksgiving. But one thing that I do kind of want to point out here is that I saw a local Fox 5 from DC report saying that Trump had a call with service members on Thanksgiving Day, where he mentioned that he referred to Beckstrom as, quote, outstanding in every way. I think this is a very interesting thing, because historically Trump doesn't feel this way about wounded, service members. He's actually got quite a long track record going against them. You've got earlier this year when he did the military parade, he was very well documented saying that he doesn't want wounded veterans being part of the military because it's not a good look for him. You have back in I think it was 2019, where there was can't remember his name. I think it was Captain Louis Avila, who was he's in a wheelchair. He's a combat veteran who suffered multiple strokes. He was in the wheelchair because of an IED. He had some brain damage and I believe a couple heart attacks. Been through a lot, sacrificed a lot, and Trump made a big deal about being seen with him. And if I remember correctly, even told the military officials who had him come out and sing the "God Bless America" to never have that man be visible in public again, which is just ridiculous given the level of sacrifice. Not to mention all the stuff back in, I think it was 2018 in France when he refused to go to the World War II memorial and cited that it was because of rain. But he was also being quoted, I believe, by his own chief of staff saying that, fallen soldiers are suckers and losers. And of course, how he's treated John McCain, and he wasn't even part of John McCain's memorial service. So there's a long track record of Trump pretty much downplaying, criticizing, and even loathing soldiers who get wounded or killed. So to hear him say, "Oh, she's outstanding," and this is like a great hero, like this is something that I want a president to say. I want him to, I'm not judging him necessarily for saying these things. I think he should say them. And even if he said bad things before, I'd like to see him say good things going forward. But it is a stark contrast. And I think it's something that people need to keep in mind that, even if he's saying these things here and now, it's because he's in the spotlight here and now. But, it's a very different record.
Someone must have had a chat with him after all those incidents that you listed there of like, hey man, not a good look to talk crap about our service members, whether they're wounded or not. Like, it's not looking good for your poll numbers. And I do remember he had historically pretty bad polls with veterans, especially. And we had that whole debacle during the campaign with the cemetery visit and the photographer and all that mess. And another thing I want to point out is the fact that why the National Guard is in DC in the first place. Well, when Trump came into office, he started this rollout of we're going to put the National Guard and the Army all across these blue cities and stuff. Well, it turns out they were never necessary in DC because DC was at a 30-year low on crime rates when Trump took office. So the whole reason, the whole story for why the deployment was necessary just falls apart completely when you look at the facts. And these are crime statistics from the DC police directly. So, it's one can make a point that Trump is kind of responsible for these deaths, for putting these service members in harm's way to begin with, because there's no reason for them to be in DC whatsoever. On the other hand, these types of atrocities are just despicable no matter who's in office. And, the whole vetting process with the asylum, that's under his watch. So whatever happened there, they need to improve their standards and improve their process going forward.
And yeah, let's not also forget that when it comes to deploying the National Guard, yes, so far the administration started out in LA, but that was mostly in response to these large protests that were happening because of ICE and how the immigration raids were being handled. Whereas with DC, there were no protests going on, and yet under the Constitution, the government is allowed to federalize that district. So the way that I view it is this was them sort of pushing this out, saying we're going to do this, and they come in under crime reduction and they try to make an example out of DC, and they can show, okay, if it can work here, it can work elsewhere. And it's interesting that all of the cities that have been chosen so far are specifically blue cities. When it comes to cracking down on crime and violence, most of those are in red cities. That's not to say that blue cities are immune from crime, but it's just completely disproportionate. And I think we need to keep that in focus because Trump has declared, I am your vengeance, and it's all about revenge and things like that. We've seen tons of attacking towards political opponents and then actually weaponizing and militarizing our own cities against us. That's where things cross the line from just a normal, vengeful, spiteful president to a full-blown dictator.